Hey there, welcome to Wild Mushroom Foraging in Texas. First, a little bit about Central Texas Mycological Society. We formed the nonprofit in 2019, and our mission is to strengthen the conservation research study of fungi in Central Texas. And so we host online and in person events ranging from walks, talks, and community workshops. And we have a class coming up, very exciting, in San Antonio with Cody Masters, who will be teaching you how to cultivate cordyceps. And so we're going to have a live stream set up too, so you can register, donate, and please support us by becoming a member if you already aren't. We are a very strong organization. We now have over 1,200 members. So, a little bit about myself. For a long time, I worked in tech and I left that world about 8 years ago. Um, and now I'm part of the Earth's Internet. I am very passionate about helping people connect and develop their kinship with the outdoors. And I do a lot of foraging. That was sort of my introduction into mycology. I'm also an urban gardener, educator. I grew up with a very large family. I have 10 siblings. I grew up in the Midwest, just outside of St. Louis, Missouri. And the first mushroom I ever learned about was the destroying angel. It had my name, so of course it captivated me. And it's one of the fatally toxic mushrooms, so it's a really good one to know. And I also like to share that, I went through a lot of early childhood trauma, and I found that psilocybin helped me overcome a lot of that. And so yeah, and there's a lot of really good research and things happening in that area as well. But today we are going to cover these topics here. We're going to talk about some 101, just really basic fungal life cycle and anatomy, safety and ethical guidelines, when and where to forage, why you should forage for wild food, tools for the hunt, and choice edibles, and some tips on cooking and things like that. So let's just get started here with some Mycology 101. Here we see an infographic of the fungal life cycle, which remains largely hidden, and mushrooms are the fruit body or the reproductive organs. For example, similar to a lot of people like to equate it with like an apple. And for most species, mushrooms pop up for a few days after rain, then decompose, and sometimes even get eaten by other fungus. And so many species of fungi do not even create mushrooms. And so spores, they are like the seeds of the fruit, and they're everywhere. So every breath we breathe, between 1 to 10 detectable spores, and spores are dispersed by insects, animals, humans, wind, and even seed the clouds and promote rainfall. Spores have about half of fungi's complete set of genes. And so when a spore falls on a growth medium or the sort of substrate, the conditions are moist from rain, the spores will germinate. And during germination, fine white filaments called hyphae will grow from the spores, and compatible hyphae mate and they create fertile mycelium. And so the mycelium underground is the most important and vegetative part of the life cycle. The mycelium breaks down carbon based organic matter, absorbs nutrients from its surroundings, much like a stomach. The more it touches, the more it consumes, and eventually gets enough energy to create a mushroom. And so, in its environment, the mycelium encounters many competitors and predators, which it can repel with an amazing set of protective enzymes and compounds. And the mycelium is thought to be the immune system of the mushroom. And so mycelium are so tiny that 1 cubic inch of soil can contain enough mycelium to stretch for 8 miles. And so they also can form this important communication network that we've heard popularized as the Wood Wide Web or the Earth's internet. And so this web beneath our feet connects vast systems of roots from plants and trees all over the planet, like this underground internet, distributing nutrients and water through this tube-like network. And about 95% or more plants have this relationship with fungi. And so it's a large part of the reason we have soil and why terrestrial life have a surface to walk on. And so without fungi, there would be no life. And that quote is from Juliana Frischi from the Fungi Foundation from the new documentary that just came out on National Geographic. You can watch it on YouTube, but they just came out with a 2-cover magazine about the importance of fungi, and you can get 2 different covers, and morels are also on the cover, which is very exciting. And so then back to the life cycle. So mycelium condenses into hyphal knots, which then develop into primordia or baby mushrooms, also called pins. And from thousands of these baby mushrooms, the organism selects the most promising few and develops into mushrooms. And so now we're back at the beginning of the cycle where the mushroom releases spores into the environment for germination. And when those spores land on a favorable substrate, the life cycle begins again. So now we're going to talk a little bit about anatomy and ID. And this is a topic that is a class all on its own. And so we actually have a few recordings on our YouTube channel on mushroom identification that gets into a lot of this language and very much into detail. But whenever you are foraging for wild mushrooms, it's really, really important to note 8 to 10 features. And it's not like there's like how can you tell if a mushroom's poisonous or not? There's not like a one size fits all. Like every category of mushroom is unique. You must know a lot of these categories, and we'll see some of these today. These edible mushrooms. We'll talk about what categories they're in, but it's important to note just 8 to 10 of these features. So substrate. All species have a host plant or prefer a substrate, and you're going to want to look if it's growing on a decaying log or in leaf litter or potentially even on an insect, as cordyceps does. And so knowing how to identify trees is super, super important. And so we want to observe the cap, the fleshy tissue that covers the top of the mushroom, and sometimes the sides. Does it have scales, zonation, striations, warts? Is it flat? Is it conical, concave, ovate? Does it have an umbo, which is kind of like a little nipple? There's a long list of words describing the cap of a mushroom that I could go on and on about. And so the underside, it's hard to see under the mushroom, and so sometimes this is the most important part of the mushroom in determining species. So you know if you're out in the wild, you want to definitely like get photos if you're not collecting for foraging, but you want to get that underside. That's super important, and this is where a lot of times the spores are produced. And so do they have gills, pores, teeth? Is it visibly smooth? Is there leftover universal veil, the skirt, or sometimes also called the ring? You're going to want to note, you can also note the spore color. So a spore print takes several hours, but you want to take the stem off of a mushroom and using your hands or scissors, place the mushrooms with the gills or pores facing down onto paper. And you can use both like a black and white paper, half and half, or some people like to use aluminum foil. And then you want to place that container over the mushroom to create an airtight seal. Leave the mushroom covered anywhere from a couple of hours to overnight based on how fresh the mushrooms are. And so the next thing you want to look at is the stem or the stipe. And so most, but not all mushrooms have a stem to extend the spores producing organism above ground and help the spores disperse further, get caught by the wind and carry on to the next, hopefully, location where it can continue its life cycle. And so the base or the vulva of the mushroom is super, super important. And this is very important when looking at the Amanita mushrooms. And so you also want to look for mycelium. Is it visible on the leaves? Is it in the soil? Is it on the heartwood or bark of the tree? Sometimes it's a different color. Some mushrooms have black mycelium, some have orange, some have white, and most of the time it's white. You're going to want to note the scent: apricot, anise, chocolate, coffee, almond, cucumber, garlic or onions, gasoline, bath soap, dirty gym socks, sperm. So these are all words that have been used to describe reproductive organs, mushrooms. So taste. This is not recommended for beginners, but sometimes this is the last thing you can do to narrow down a species. And as long as tasting a mushroom, you don't allow it to go through your GI tract, you spit it out, it's not going to poison you. And so again, this is something for advanced mycologists. And so a lot of mushrooms that have like a peppery taste, and this is something people do for like the Lactarius, Russula, and the Cortinarius and Gymnopolis species, to determine if it's poisonous or toxic or an edible mushroom. And so this one, so yeah, a peppery taste usually indicates that it might be a toxic mushroom. So staining is another thing that you want to look for. So in the Boletus, and then everyone's favorite chemical in mushrooms, psilocybe, contains their blue staining when they are bruised. And so that's something you also can note when you're out foraging. So now we're going to talk about safety and ethics. And so, first you're going to want to accurately ID every mushroom you plan to eat with an expert or two. And like we just covered, you need to look at about 8 to 10 things to determine the species. And again, there's no simple guideline which will separate edibles from those that are not. So you want to have 100% confidence. So just when in doubt, throw it out. And so many edible species have toxic lookalikes. And so learn what those are and don't rely on just photographs, drawings, or iNaturalist recommendations. So you're going to want to also only collect fresh mushrooms. You wouldn't eat moldy or rotting produce from the grocery store, and the same for mushrooms in the wild. So you don't want to collect in contaminated areas or where fertilizers or pesticides are present. So mushrooms can readily pick up chemicals in the environment, and so you want to avoid collecting along busy roads or anywhere near old dump sites. And so you don't want to eat fungi growing on ornamental trees as well. And in some cases, toxins in wood may seep into the fungal tissues. So you also don't want to eat raw or uncooked mushrooms. And this applies to all mushrooms, even store-bought cultivated mushrooms. So thorough cooking provides improved digestibility, flavor, available nutrition, and the elimination of some potentially harmful substances. So, however, be aware that cooking will not eliminate all types of toxins in mushrooms. Um, so just know that. And so you may have all followed, if you follow us online, or um, if you follow a lot of mushroom news, there was a poisoning last year in Bozeman, Montana, at a place called Dave's Sushi. And there's a lot of news stories, and the Department of Health in Montana just came out with a report this month about this restaurant that served basically raw morels on sushi, and they didn't cook them. They may have had like bacteria as well, but there has been known to be cases where people get sick from eating these morel mushrooms, that raw morel mushrooms. And so it's super, super, super important to always cook your mushrooms, even the agaricus. I know that like some people put them in salads and things like that, but you want to cook them. And so if you're trying a new mushroom, try just a bite for the first time, then wait about 24 hours before eating any more. So some people have an allergy to one particular mushroom species, just as some people are allergic to shrimp and wheat and dairy and other foods. So do not consume alcohol when trying a mushroom for the first time. So wait until you are sure you're not allergic to the particular species before having it with wine or beer. And so when consuming a new mushroom species, the presence of alcohol may produce stronger allergic reactions. And so one of the species we'll learn about today too also has coprine, which has a reaction where your body is unable to digest uh, um, alcohol. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the ethics of foraging. And so I like to share with people, the forest is not your grocery store. And it's important to kind of get out of that consumer mindset. And so this short video that I'm going to share, Robin Wall Kimmerer from Braiding Sweetgrass, she explains what ethical reciprocity between humans and the natural world looks like. And she's talking a lot about plants, but this is applicable to mushrooms as well. And so I'm going to link this video in the bio because I'm not getting it to record or play on this recording here. Okay, so when and where to forage. So you have to treat yourself like a mushroom to some degree in order to keep on discovering things. Funny quote by Christian Bale. So timing is everything. So I made a calendar for everybody today that it has the seasonality of wild mushrooms. So this Gantt style calendar chart will give you, it's very specific to Texas. And so there's a couple of layers. There are uh, level 1, level 2. So level 1, they don't have toxic lookalikes in Texas. Level 2 do. So it's important to learn what those are. And we have a lot of great information on our website, on our social media, where we try to share especially a lot of these edible mushrooms and share details on how you can tell the difference between the toxic lookalike. So then I also included some uncommon or mushrooms that are just more geographically rare and harder to forage, but are choice edibles, and you can find them, and it is a real treat whenever whenever you do collect them. So not only is the seasonality important, but timing your foraging with rainfall is super important. So mushrooms growth, like plants, prefer a range of temperatures. And so if we get rain during that time, We will see mushrooms sometimes one day later. Some mushrooms will rehydrate with rain and be available for foraging. Some pop up right away. And then others, it takes a good while for them to develop that energy and develop that fruiting body and fruit. So, and then the time spent in the forest is super important. So you can spend hours getting lost in the woods and looking for mushrooms, and it's a real kind of labor of love, per se. So yeah, so pick up one of these. We'll have a download available for everyone that registers for this class to have this calendar, but the back has a list with more details of um, of these mushrooms. So you want to know the land. So Texas is divided into 10 ecoregions: the piney woods, the Gulf prairies, marshes, post oak savanna, blackland prairies, the cross timbers, South Texas plains, the Edwards Plateau, the rolling plains, high plains, and Trans Pecos. And so it's important to learn about these regions, learn about what trees and what mushrooms fruit in these regions. And you can do this using a lot of tools like iNaturalist. There's another mapping device called Mushroom Observer, but iNaturalist probably has the most data. So that said, about 95% of Texas land is private. So finding private and public land where you can legally forage is a challenge. And so anti foraging laws were codified post emancipation and during the Indian Removal Act, when European settlers were stealing land, forcing migration, and trying to control and retaliate against former slaves and indigenous people who forage for their survival. And so it's still illegal to forage in Texas state parks, city, county parks, preserves, on public property without permission. And sometimes fines for foraging can be up to $2,000. And so you can harvest above ground parts of plants and mushrooms from Texas roadsides, but again, contamination is a real issue. So you're allowed to harvest 1 gallon of mushrooms per day for private use only in 4 of the national forests in East Texas. And you can harvest 1 pint of fruit, nuts, and berries per person per day for personal use in the Big Thicket National Preserve in East Texas, but mushrooms are protected. And so you can also find a list of hip campgrounds that offer and allow foraging on their private property. And so, like I mentioned earlier, mushrooms have a host tree, or they prefer specific growing condition. So knowing your trees is super important. You're not always going to be looking down at the forest floor. You're going to be looking at the trees. And so knowing them and knowing what they grow in symbiosis with, or if they decompose with a certain tree species. You must know if this mushroom likes hardwood trees or conifers. Conifers here would be pines. There's a lot more going east. Also, ash juniper. And so, mushroom fruiting occurs when there is rain and humidity, some within hours, some within 5 to 7 days after the rain. So, you're going to want to look near these riparian areas near water. So now we're going to talk about the biggest challenge with foraging in Texas. So as you all know, we just sort of came out, hopefully, out of this. We're still coming out of this severe drought. And so the average Central Texas rainfall is about 36 inches. Same for North Texas, roughly the same. And in 2023, we had 19 inches of rain. And so we didn't do a whole lot of mushroom walks because of this. And a lot of people were not finding the things that they would normally be able to find. And so deep East Texas, on the other hand, has about 60 inches. So that area of Texas has a lot more rain and a lot more diversity because of that. And you can get kind of an idea, the Pacific Northwest gets about 60 inches on the low end to 240 inches of rainfall. So that's significant in the amount of rainfall and the amount of mushrooms that will fruit after rainfall. So, why would you want to forage for mushrooms? So, this quote here is from The Mushroom at the End of the World, really, really great book. So, food sovereignty. You want to reclaim and redefine healthy and culturally appropriate food through ecological and ethical methods. And so, another good reason would be for mental and physical health, the nutrition, the secondary metabolites, which I'm not going to get into too many details, but if that interests you, you can learn more about it. But these mushrooms produce, especially in the wild, they produce these when they come in contact with other bacteria, other fungi, they produce compounds and enzymes that are super, super healthy for you, and a lot of our medicines and things that are extracted in pharmaceutical industries includes a lot of these things that and so we can get these things in wild foods, both mushrooms and plants. And so another reason would be to form kinship with the land, so make fungal friends, both mushroom and human, and get in touch with your inner child, become a forest fairy. So, in some parts of the country, people forage for money, and I don't recommend that anyone try to forage mushrooms for a living here. And as we just learned, Texas doesn't have the rainfall required, and we also have very little public land. So, it's not a good idea to do foraging for money. So, tools for the hunt. So, if you don't have a plan, you become part of somebody else's plan. That's a Terrence McKenna quote. So you're going to want to have a basket or a mesh tote. I carry like produce bags with me so I can like separate different species of mushrooms or give them to friends I'm with. You want to bring multiple for separating the species. You can also use like a tackle box too if you're looking for small mushrooms. But the spores spread, so you want to be able to have the spores come through like this mesh tote or bag. It's a way to spread the spores. So a lot of spores there spread by animals, humans, birds, um, all of those things. So you want to be part of that life cycle and help the spores spread. So you're going to want to have a knife with a brush on it, or have a separate brush or a cleaning rag for wiping off soil and debris from the ground. And so you want to do this like before you put it in your basket. I've gone out a few times without a knife, and I regretted it because you end up just spreading more and more soil. They get in the gills, they can get in the pores of the mushrooms, and it can get really messy. So it's best to, cut and then clean right there in the forest. So you want to have a map or a compass or GPS. A lot of times, sometimes deep in the forest, a smartphone may not, you may not have your GPS, but some people use apps like Strava. I know GPS works differently than data, so a lot of times, you'll need it to be able to find your way towards water, trails, and then back home again. So you want to have like a smartphone or a camera to take your mushroom selfies, your melfies, photos of your finds. And also, if you aren't sure about the ID, make sure to take photos of the cap, the underside, the full mushroom, the environment it's growing in, the cross section, the bruising. And if you have mobile data in the field, tools like iNaturalist can be helpful, and it's a free app that uses pattern recognition to recommend an ID. And so it's always a good start, but you always want to confirm it with human, Texas Mushroom ID, our Facebook group, Central Texas Mycology. There's a bunch of them on Facebook, thanks to Alan Rockefeller several years back, creating a lot of Facebook identification pages. So it's a good place to get confirmation. You just want to look at a lot of pictures and very Texas specific mushroom pictures, because mushrooms change in morphology by region. And so the guidebook that we recommend too, and if you want to bring that out in the forest, digital copies probably better to have it on your phone, and then you have the capability of doing search, which is really nice. Mushrooms of the Gulf State, which I'll talk a little bit more about at the end, but it's the most recent up-to-date guidebook on UT Press, and we're going to be giving away one of those at our live stream as well. So you're going to want to bring bug spray, because with rain, we know that brings out the mosquitoes. Water, trail snacks. You're going to want to have some rubber boots or waterproof boots, raincoat if it's rainy. It's a great time to go out foraging when it's raining. And then you'll probably want to have a backpack to carry a lot of these things in. So that's a short list. We could have a whole presentation, and we've actually done that in the past on what do you have in your what tools do you take out with you in the field. So now we're going to get into the choice edible mushrooms. So level 1 are mushrooms that don't have toxic lookalikes. How easy it is to find, and a lot of times they're found in these very urban settings. And so you see them when you're driving, harvesting, some people call it. And so we also do a fun bike ride every year called the Myco Psycho to forage it. And this year we're hoping to do one in San Antonio as well, but we do it through central Austin in these urban areas. So a lot of times they're growing on the heartwood, which is the very slow decomposing. Ground rot only consumes a certain part of wood, and so it will hollow out limbs, and so you do have to be careful about that. It does cause stem failure, but a lot of times it's because humans improperly trim their trees and they don't do the correct things to prevent spores from making their way into the hardwood. And so these spores, as we know, they're everywhere, they're floating everywhere, they're in the soil. And so if you have your exposed hardwood on the tree, it's likely that on a live oak it's going to make its way into the tree and slowly spit out this delicious culinary mushroom. And so on the plus side, this mushroom has, it's very nutritious. It's got carcinogen properties. It's got fat, fiber, tastes just like chicken. You can really sub in any recipe with this mushroom. That's how I recommend that you cook with it. So you can get really creative because chicken is a very versatile meat. And so some people will mistake the shaggy bracket. A lot of times it fruits around the same time. I've seen people say it looks like the southern jack-o'-lantern, but make sure you look at photos of southern jack-o'-lantern. It is a guild mushroom, and it's a toxic one too, but it's orange. And so I've seen people on our Facebook group say, think that just because of the color, that it's the same mushroom. But again, you have to note these 8 to 10 features on a mushroom, which is not an easy task. It takes time. It's like learning a new language. So now we're going to talk about lion's mane, which is another choice edible and medicinal mushroom that rarely grows in the wild in central Texas, but I've found it in about 2 to 3 spots, and it always grows back. Not always, but it grows back on the same tree every year, usually around the same time. So it's always good to take photos and take notes, keep a journal. This one, as you all probably know, it can be cultivated. And so it's also a decomposer fungi. It's available in farmers markets, and you can even find it at HEB. So it's a tooth fungus. It's white and fuzzy, and it starts to turn yellow and brown as it ages, and that's when it'll get kind of bitter and won't be so good for its edible characteristics, but you might be able to still use it for medicinal purposes, for a tincture. So if you are using it for medicinal purposes, just make sure you kind of air dry it. Don't use heat because it will break down some of the medicinal compounds in the mushroom. And so with this mushroom too, the mycelium is actually beneficial and has medicine in it as well. And so this will fruit in the winter. And so if you look on your calendar, you'll see it's in the winter after rain. It fruits on decomposing hardwood or heartwood or cankers. And I've mostly seen it on post oaks here in central Texas. I know that in East Texas, you see a lot more, especially there's a couple of other species of Hericium, and they grow on logs and things like that. So the bear tooth, barehead's tooth, coral tooth. So the flavor, it's mildly sweet, tender, texture that mimics shellfish like scallops, crab, and lobster. And so not only does this mushroom taste delicious, it's good for you, contains bioactive substances that have beneficial effects on your body, especially your brain, heart, and gut. Scientific studies have found this mushroom may reduce inflammation, relieve depression, anxiety, protects against dementia and Alzheimer's disease, protect against ulcers in the digestive tract, reduce heart disease risk, and help manage diabetes symptoms. It's also got cancer fighting properties. So, yeah, a lot of things. So, the lookalikes again, there are the Hericium americanum, the bear's tooth, and the coral tooth. And then I've seen people on our Facebook group mistake the marshmallow polypore, which is not edible. It's a good mushroom for decomposition, and it's actually being used, from what I understand, on a experiment at Texas A&M to decompose PFAS, which um, are forever chemicals. So yeah.
Je te sens jusqu'au bout de mes doigts. Tu es tout ce que je veux, mais rien dont j'ai besoin. Enfin, je déteste comment t'envahis ma tête. Du moment où je me réveille avant que je m'endorme. Je veux ma DOPAMINE. Je te sens jusqu'au bout de mes doigts.
Right, so we're in peak morel season right now. People all over Central Texas have been finding basically berry rings of morels. So as the dewberries start to blossom, they were looking so beautiful on a hike that I was on yesterday. This choice edible, super sought after morel starts to fruit in Central Texas, and they're very elusive. They have a very short season, as you can see on the calendar. But they have a honeycomb appearance, lives the network of ridges and pits, composing their caps. And so yeah, so I'm already thinking about ways I can preserve morels with blueberries once they are ready to harvest. And so I found my first morels in Texas in 2020 when the pandemic shut everything down, South by Southwest was canceled, and in my newfound free time I wandered along creeks looking under junipers for this honeycomb mushroom. So morels are found to be saprophytic, which means they're decomposing, also mycorrhizal and endophytic, which means they attach to roots. And different parts of their life. And so in Texas, I have found morels in riparian areas, from limestone to grasses, and a lot of duff from cedars or ash junipers. Also where cedar elms and ash. I've seen them around hackberries, persimmons, yopons, cosmos. And so these are found just in like this, all the way up Central Texas, all the way up to North Texas. So they require moisture from the rain. So moisture like we've had the last week is really, really good for hunting for them. And so the last few years have been really terrible. I haven't found any morels because of our severe droughts. The year we had, a bunch of flooding, lots of rain, the morels have come out. And this year, thankfully, we haven't had flooding, but lots of really good rain. So lookalikes, Geromitra, the Halbella, and Burfogenera have some toxic species, but I wasn't able to find any observations on iNaturalist ones toxic. But as I mentioned earlier, death by morels have been real. They were the deaths that happened this last year were from imported morels that were cultivated in China, and they potentially had bacteria, or they weren't cooked properly, so undercooked. So yeah, so the same with some of these lookalikes. Some people say they cause gastric upset, but it may be because they just didn't cook them right. So reishi, there are 8 species in Texas of this prized medicinal mushroom, so used in traditional Chinese medicine for thousands of years. It's antiviral, anti-tumor, anti-carcinogenic, and it's good for immune system stimulants, respiratory aid, antioxidant, anti-aging, and more. And so this is a polypore or shelf mushroom that can be smaller, 4 to 12 inches apart, and it has this woody texture and is brown to uh, uh, reddish brown with a varnished appearance with white pores on the underside. And so you want to make sure that you harvest it when it's still fresh and the pores are white on the underside. And so you can find this, it grows, it takes quite a long time to grow. So you may note it when it's first getting started. You want to kind of take note of those, like mark the GPS, drop a pin, take a photo with the GPS coordinates. But they grow through the spring through the fall, at the base or on hardwood stumps, logs, especially oaks and pecans that have had their roots disturbed. In East Texas, they can be found at the base of dead pine tree stumps. And so the flavor is incredibly bitter because of the medicinal compounds. So it's great in tea. And I make a really awesome tea called Mush Love, which has 3 aphrodisiacs. Reishi is considered an aphrodisiac. Ginger and hibiscus, all aphrodisiacs. Make the tea, get some mush love going in your life. And the recipe is again on our website blog. So turkey tail, so this is a very aggressive decomposer, saprophytic, of rotting wood, including ash juniper trees or cedar trees. It has multiple bands and visible pores on the underside, unlike its look-alike, the false turkey tail or Sterium osteria, which has a smooth surface. And so it's found in the spring through the winter after rain, slow growing in shelves on wood. And it's used again in traditional Chinese medicine. It's been found to improve response to cancer medicines and radiation. It's used for muscle strength, fatigue, UTIs, many other conditions. And so there's no toxic lookalikes. The false turkey tail, it just doesn't have any medicine in it. And it's also something that, you would probably use in a tea or a broth. But yeah, a lot of people use this one to make soups and tinctures, that sort of thing. Capsules, you can dehydrate it, make capsules.
One of my favorite snacks to bring to events are chocolate-dipped candied wood ears. I used some mushrooms that I found recently foraging and rehydrated them in hot water for about 3 minutes. Then I soaked them overnight in Mush Love tea, which is an aphrodisiac tea with reishi, hibiscus, and ginger. I then placed them in the freezer overnight to harden. Next, in a makeshift double boiler over the stove, and dipped each mushroom in chocolate and placed them on a tray with parchment paper, and then put back into the freezer overnight. They were super delicious, and the wood ears absorbed a lot of the flavor. A delicious and fun treat to bring to the first wild mushroom walk with REI just outside of San Antonio at Government Canyon Park. Much love! One of my favorite snacks to bring to events are chocolate-dipped
so wood ears. There are 6 different species observed in Texas on iNaturalist.
For about 3 minutes.
And so this is considered a jelly mushroom because it has this jelly texture. It lacks gills or pores. The caps are wavy, ear-shaped. And they also produce white spores, and so they grow in clusters on decaying hardwood after the rain. And so they are a popular ingredient in many Chinese dishes, such as hot and sour soup, ramen. It's been used in Chinese medicine. It's also used in Ghana as a blood tonic. And so modern research into the possible medical application has variously concluded that wood ears are anti-tumor, hypoglycemic, anticoagulant.
One of my favorite snacks
has
to bring
cholesterol
to events
lowering
are
properties.
Candied
It
Wood
absorbs
Ears.
flavors.
I
It's
use
great
some
in
mushrooms
soups
that I
and
found
ramens.
recently
Contains
foraging
protein,
and
iron,
rehydrated
calcium,
them in
and
hot water for about 3
phosphorus.
minutes.
And
Then I
so
soaked
the
them
look-alike
overnight
is
much
also
love tea,
edible.
which is
I don't think it has all the
aphrodisiac
medicinal
tea with
compounds,
reishi,
but that
hibiscus,
is your
and ginger.
amber jelly
I
mushroom.
then placed them
Level 2.
Concrete burns my feet in the early night heat. 5 o'clock, you and me, glass full crushed on the floor. My gold feet red, bleeding. I don't care, keep singing.
Singing, sinking, dying, diving, loving, giving, pulling, pushing, falling, feeling, swinging, swimming. Singing, sinking, dying, diving, falling, feeling, swinging, swimming.
Alright, so those are a bunch of photos from different forays and events, going out foraging chanterelle. So there's Canderella species has about 10 different, the Canderella genus has about 10 species observed in they all have slightly different features. So I'm going to give little details and describe commonly found species. So they range from like orangey yellow, typically a funnel shape, and they can be found popping up as individual mushrooms, or as you saw in the movie, sometimes they grow in clusters. So on the lower surface and underneath
Singing,
the
sinking,
smooth cap,
dying, diving,
they have
loving,
rounded
giving, pulling,
forked
pushing, falling, feeling,
folds,
swinging, swimming.
sometimes
Singing,
called soft
sinking,
scales,
dying, diving,
that run
falling,
almost
feeling,
all the way down the
swinging,
stipe, which tapers down seamlessly from the cap. They grow up to 4 inches, but many are just a few inches and pack a lot of flavor. And so you can find them in the spring and summer months, sometimes in the fall. You get a lot of rain, but it's still warm out, so they need a lot of rain. So the year we had 2 100-year floods, it was just chanterelle where I was finding baskets full of them. And so the Texas-style flash floods, and that's not always a good thing. As we all know, there's a lot of climate upheaval happening in our extractive system we live in.
Singing,
So when it's
sinking,
muggy,
dying, diving, loving, giving,
sauna, lots of mosquitoes are out, so are the chanterelles. So they are symbiotic, they connect, and they are symbiotic with mature oak trees. I found them on near red and Texas live oaks, and in areas where there's a lot of leaf matter, not a lot of disturbance from mowing. Trees near creeks where water has been flowing downhill, slightly downhill, super important. So the flavor, many species emit this fruity aroma reminiscent of apricots. So in East Texas, we have the red chanterelles, the Texensis, Cinnabonus, and they have this really unique kind of peppery flavor. It's super delicious. So now, the lookalikes. The southern jack-o'-lantern, almost southern, is considered the false chanterelle in Texas, and I've seen it over and over again, people thinking that they are picking chanterelles. They're very different to me morphologically, just in size, but people again just are looking at this one data point, the color. They're looking for this orange mushroom, and so we have a really good Alright, so honey mushrooms pop up in the spring and fall in large clusters at the base of dead or dying trees. And so when the clusters appear to be terrestrial, they are actually growing from underground wood. And so on the roots. And so this parasitic fungi mushroom is in the same genus as the largest living organism on this planet, sometimes called the humongous fungus in Oregon. In East Texas, you can find honey mushrooms in the Armillaria genus that has a sticky so the flavor is moderately sweet, sometimes bitter aftertaste and a gelatinous surface. And so again, the look-alike is the toxic jack-o'-lantern mushroom, which is orange, bright orange. The laughing gem, Gymnophilus junopius, which is orange bitter, orange to brown spores and a ring. And this also contains psilocybin or psilocybin. The deadly gallerina marginata, which is smaller and has smooth cap, stalk ring and brown spores. So this one got to be really careful. Definitely confirm with an expert. And so this mushroom, which you all may be more familiar with because it can be grown, cultivated, it's a primary decomposer with fan-shaped caps measuring 2 to 8 inches across, and the gills run down the stem, or they're decurrent, and the color varies from white to gray to tan, and so you can find them in the spring, fall, and winter after rain. They grow in clusters on dead or dying hardwood along creeks. I see them on black willows and oaks. And so you want to, when you prepare oysters, they're great as a meat replacement in soups, stir fries, salads, all kinds of recipes, and of course cook them, especially in salads. And so some people say the southern jack-o'-lantern is a look-alike. Also angel wings, I put that really big here because I meant to add that on the lookalikes. But angel wings are also one that grow on conifers, so I've seen them usually pretty small on ash junipers, but I think in East Texas they grow on pines and on junipers as well, and they're much bigger. So it's, but yeah, like they look very similar. They have the decurrent gills. So we're going to talk about puffballs for a bit. So when young, it is relatively smooth and spherical, and they slightly deflate with age and turn purplish and brownish on the inside. Some peel, some have spines. There's about 15 species found in Texas, and you can find them late summer, fall, and after rain, and overgrazed prairies and grasslands, and even in desert type climates. And so they don't have a very strong flavor on their own, but they do absorb flavor. And so one of the things you can see people do is make a giant puffball pizza. And so we do have a few observations in Texas of the western giant puffball. And so puffballs are also well known by Native American tribes of North America, and they were used in various ways, like wound care. And so lookalikes, some people say Amanita species, which contain toxins, and some are fatal. And so you also want to do a cross section of the puffball, and if it's white on the center, it's still okay to eat. But a lot of times, if you're not finding them fresh right after a rain, they're going to turn brown and purple on the inside and be no longer good to eat. So the shaggy ink cap. So this is a very common saprophyte decomposer. When it first emerges, it looks like little white cylinders and then white bell-shaped caps covered with scales. And the gills are white, and then they turn pink, and then quickly turn black and secrete a black inky liquid filled with spores. And this is called deliquesce, this process of spore dispersal. And so this is also why it gets the name ink cap, and it actually can be used to make ink. But they're found in the spring and fall after rains. They grow on lawns, along gravel roads, and in waste areas. So again, be careful because you don't want to do it. Pick them from a contaminated area. So the flavor is mild, and large quantities of shaggy mane can be used as the liquid component of risotto, replacing the like chicken stock. And so there's a really great recipe that you can find on our blog. This is actually this month's mushroom of the month, and the first mushroom recipe book in North America, in this part of the world, was written over about 100 years ago. There's a bunch of shaggy mane recipes, and it's in the public domain, so we have a link to download a digital copy of that recipe book. But it's got a lot of other edible mushroom recipes, so it's kind of fun to look through. And there's even some commentary on kind of mycophobia and people's fear of mushrooms that it's really interesting to read as well. But lookalikes, the scaly ink cap, and as I mentioned, it has a antabuse-like chemical, coprine, that causes a poisonous reaction when consumed with alcohol, so be very careful. Scaly ink caps are popping up this same time of year right now, and so just don't consume it with alcohol if you are going to consume it. Some people say the Chlorophyllum mollibides, the vomiter mushroom, looks like this mushroom, and that one has a toxic compound. It has a green spore print, so it's fun to pick just for the spore print. So as the weather stays cool, look out for the edible wood bluet, and it just got a new name. So Cloibia nuda or tarda was formerly Lepista or Clitocybe. It changes names a lot with DNA sequencing, so it's not super important. It's important to know the morphological features and know these like details about it and how to distinguish it from its potentially toxic lookalikes. And so it has this very distinct lilac, purple pink color, and even tan as it ages. I find that they get like a very iridescent cap as well. But the underside, the gills are a lot more purple than the top cap. And so younger specimens are lighter with more convex caps. And while they mature, the specimens have a darker color and a flatter cap. And so the gills are attached to a short, stout stem with a bulbous base, which is usually attached to leaves, which is the substrate that it's decomposing. And so they have light pink to white spores. And so they're found in the fall through the spring and fruiting in hardwood leaf duff, which it decomposes. So wood bluets have a very distinct odor that has been likened by one author to that of frozen orange juice. Fresh wood bluets are great with eggs and breakfast tacos. As they get older, they become more tan and iridescent color on the cap and taste bitter. And I sometimes will collect these and throw them in my leaf compost because they're such good decomposers and will colonize and grow on the hardwood leaf litter. And so lookalikes, be warned, because There are deadly poisonous lookalikes in the Cortinaris or the webcam family that grow in similar conditions and around the same time. So it's important to do a spore print and also confirm the ID with an expert. And the spores of woodbluets are light pink and white, and the spores of Cortinarius are rust colored. So we have a really great blog post on how to identify and determine, separate these mushrooms. So now I'm going to share a few uncommon. So these are real treasure mushrooms if you can find them. So the hedgehog, it's a spore-bearing structure of teeth rather than gills. They grow late fall into winter after rain. They're ectomycorrhizal with pines. So as you see on the calendar, they're only found in East Texas. There's only 20 observations on iNaturalist of them. So I've found them in the fall, winter time in East Texas. They also contain many fatty acids and antioxidants, and there's no toxic lookalikes of this mushroom. So, Hen of the Woods, there's 5 research grade observations on iNaturalist, and 1 in San Marcos, which is a real find. So, this is also known as maitake. It's considered a polypore mushroom that grows at the base of trees, particularly old oaks and maples, and it is typically found in the late summer to early autumn. So it's been consumed for centuries in China and Japan, and again, no toxic lookalikes. Some people confuse it for the black staining polypore, which can be edible, but it's not as tasty. So wheat lacoche is a fungus that partners with corn kernels to turn them into tasty mushrooms with a delicate earthy flavor that's compared to truffles. And so this fungus causes a metabolic change in the corn that causes a lot of proteins and also contains acids called lysine. And so this typically nixtamalization, which is done to corn and to make masa, to make it edible and nutritious, that's what's been done for thousands of years. So it's a culinary tradition that comes to us from the Nahuatl speaking people of Central America and the Hopi of the Turtle Island, who are among those who intentionally encouraged this fungus to thrive in their cornfields. And so a seasonal staple in Central America, farmers and chefs in the US are starting to embrace this, and wheat lacoche is finding its way back into fields and stores and onto menus. And so wheat lacoche is ready to harvest once the galls have formed, but before they turn hollow and powdery on the inside. And so the exact time frame depends on specific environmental factors, generally in about 2 weeks. And so, as I mentioned, this fungus causes a metabolic change in corn, causing a lot of more protein and amino acids, making it more digestible. So, this earthy flavor that's compared to truffles. There are lots of recipes that include wheat lacoche, and the simple preparation is just chopping it up, adding herbs and onions, and making quesadilla with Oaxacan cheese. Que rico. And so we announced our program is starting again this year because it's time to plant corn. And this year we're trying a different experiment, and I brought seeds today if anybody wants to take some home. But yeah, they're for local pickup only. And you can sign up on our website to get notified when there are seeds available. But we are trying seeds that are inoculated with the dried spores. And so we want you to try it at home, try to grow corn. So if you're a gardener really into growing corn, definitely would love to have you try growing wheat lacoche. So lobster mushroom in Texas, there's only 26 observations, and I think I was the first person like 3 or 4 years ago to add a lobster mushroom observation on iNaturalist. So it's neither a mushroom nor a crustacean, but rather a parasitic Ascomycetes fungus that grows on certain species of mushrooms in the Russula or Lactarius genus. And so it turns them this reddish orange color and that resembles the outer shell of cooked lobster and even tastes like seafood. And so molds can be toxic. So just be really careful that you're seeing this red texture on the mushroom. So the peach fly agaric is a more common mushroom, but it's only found in East Texas, and it is mycorrhizal. It's in symbiosis with the loblolly pine, so the Amanita persiana, and its deciduous oak and hemlock trees can also be found in East Texas in the late fall to early spring. And so the cap color varies from bright red and fades to yellow and oranges peach. And additionally, the universal veil material is usually present merely as scattered fragments on the cap. So our famous Mario mushroom or the emoji mushroom is in the same genus. It's the Amanita muscaria, which isn't found in Texas, but it is similar in the compounds that it contains. So this mushroom does contain the neurotoxin ibotenic acid, which can be decarboxylized into muscimol, which is a legal psychoactive compound. And a few studies have shown that it inhibits neural and glial GABA uptake, similar to alcohol, and it can help with depression, anxiety, muscular pain, promote sleep, but without the hangover. So you can find gummies, all kinds of uh, uh, mushroom medicine with this mushroom in it. And so there's a company called Hometown Heroes here that has a magic muscaria gummy. And so some people even believe the myth of Santa is derived from shamanic uses of the fly agaric mushroom near the North Pole. And Fungi Foundation has actually cataloged 200 ancestral and traditional uses of this mushroom. Some uses are by shamans in the Northern Hemisphere for purposes such as communicating with spirits and ancestors, increasing courage and inducing altered states of consciousness. So factor fiction, or just a cute Christmas card design, we are glad that the indigenous uses of this mushroom are being cataloged and protected for future generations. So just a few more and we'll be done. So the pecan truffle, which is found in pecan orchards in association with the pecan tree. They can fetch $160 a pound at markets, and so they fruit through the winter into spring. Um, I'm not aware of any toxic lookalikes, just things that don't taste that well. There's a lot of um, truffles that are just consumed by rodents and animals, insects. So witch's butter is another mushroom, Tremella mesenterica. It's a jelly fungus as well. It grows in crevices and barks and pollen and attaches to branches after rain. It's pretty flavorless, but it absorbs a lot of flavor, and it can be used as an emodulating cooling soup. And I've made this same soup with snow fungus, which is also Tremella formicosa, I believe, which I don't have here, but that one has been found, a few observations in Texas. Witch's butter is more common, 430 observations. So another mushroom. I mean, there's a lot of other uncommonly found, and more. They may have toxic lookalikes. The Jackson slender Caesar is one, snow fungus. But yeah, so resources, real quick, we have all these on our website as well under resources. So there's an 800 number if you think you've been poisoned, you or your pet. There's also a Facebook group that's really fast. A lot of experts are on there willing to help you identify field guides, mushrooms of the Gulf states, um, and then the Audubon Society of North America recently came out with a new mushroom guide, and that one's really great as well for all North American mushrooms. Facebook groups, as I mentioned, we have a Facebook group, Texas Mushroom Identification. There's also a Texas Foraging community, which doesn't do IDs, but you can go there and learn a lot just from seeing what other people are sharing, recipes, all those really great things you can learn from that community. Um, so, apps, I mentioned iNaturalist several times. Again, don't take it as an absolute, uh, but yeah, it's a good place to start. Mushroom Observer, Mushroom Expert, Texas Mushrooms. These are all websites that have a lot of photos that you can compare what you've taken photos of, what you're looking at. Clubs and organizations. So, Central Texas Mycological Society, please support us, join us. If you already aren't a member and you're in the region and want to come out and come to our events, do more with us, um, North American Mycological Association, and then North Texas Mycological Association. Those are all really great organizations. So, again, thank you for your time. Time for questions. Become a member. Let's myceliate. Follow us. All those things. Thanks for joining.